Yes, right there. Yeah. And maybe I'll go this way.
With 41 wilderness areas, totaling to more than 4 million acres of roadless terrain, and a higher average elevation than any other state, Colorado is a paradise for backcountry hunting and fishing. Whether you're hunting elk in the high country or fishing for native cutthroats in an alpine lake, the combination of the rugged terrain and an unexpected turn in the weather could potentially lead to a life-threatening incident. Therefore, the most important thing to have with you while exploring remote locations can be a survival kit and some basic survival knowledge. If you find yourself in a dangerous situation, a properly stocked survival kit and having the ability and desire to stay alive can mean the difference between life and death. Survival expert Peter Kummerfelt explains.
Hello, my name is Peter Kummerfelt, and I've been an outdoor safety and survival instructor for my entire life. And I'd like to share a few tips with you today about the survival business. You know, everybody thinks they know what surviving is all about. But the truth of the matter is, when you pin them down, they really don't have a good feel for what the word survival means. To me, survival means the ability and the desire to keep yourself alive all alone under adverse conditions until you're rescued. Now that's a bit of a mouthful. The word ability implies there are some skills. There's some things that you better be able to do. You better, for example, be able to shelter yourself. You better be able to build a fire. You better be able to keep yourself hydrated. Dehydration is a huge problem in the outdoors. And you better be able to signal to those airplanes that are flying by and draw their attention so that you get rescued quickly. The ability, the desire, again, with desire, we think we have all the desire in the world to keep on living when things are going sour around us. But the truth of the matter is, you can have all the desire in the world to survive, but the environment can still overwhelm you if you're not prepared. All alone, you can't count on there being anybody else out there. It'd be nice if there was, but you can't count on that. If there are other people, you can pool your talents and pool your knowledge and pool your skills. But very often we find that people are out there by themselves, totally dependent upon themselves for their safety, the fire building, the shelter building, whatever it may be. The ability to signal to other people is really important. That airplane flying by, looking down on the Rocky Mountains, you're a tiny little entity on the face of the earth right there. You've got to make yourself bigger. So this whole survival business is wrapped around skill and knowledge, and then you can be a survivor. The people that recreate in Colorado's outdoors expose themselves to a whole series of hazards that, if they don't pay attention to, could harm them and, in fact, ultimately could kill them. What are we talking about? Well, lightning is one. We sit here right in the Rocky Mountain chain, and we have a lot of lightning activity through the summertime, but lightning can occur at any time of the year. Surprises some people from time to time. But typically, it's a summertime activity. So what do? Don't be or be connected to the tallest object in the area. That's rule number one. Reduce your exposure, get down, move down to lower altitudes, move into timberline where the trees are all of an even height, move away from the tree trunks and stand there until the storm passes through. Stand there with your feet right close together, the least amount of contact with the ground, and if you can, squat down to a tight ball. Again, the least amount of contact with the ground. Don't be or be connected to the tallest object in the area. That tall object can track lightning right down to you and cause you harm. Metal on your body really doesn't cause any increased attraction, but it does tell the doctors where you're going to be burned. So get rid of any metal. You fishermen, get out of the water. If you can, get back into your car. That's the safest place to be. There's no guaranteed safe area. So lightning is a significant threat to your safety. Altitude is another threat. particularly for people that come to Colorado from out of state to hunt and fish. The increased altitude causes you to become hypoxic. Your brain's not functioning properly. In fact, your whole body's not functioning properly. And if you don't go back down to lower altitudes when you're feeling sick, you run the risk of actually dying at high altitudes. What is high altitude? Really, in terms of altitude illness, it's anything over 8,000 feet. If you're above 8,000 feet, you have a headache, and you're not feeling well, you're altitude ill until somebody tells you otherwise. Don't keep going up after that elk. Don't keep fishing. Go back down until the situation resolves itself. The weather is another significant threat. If you're not dressed adequately or you don't have the means to protect yourself, you can become a hypothermia victim. And that's obviously not good. And people forget that even in the summertime, when it's hot out, you can become a hypothermic victim too. Too high, too hot. That could be a problem. So there's lots of things that can cause you harm. You've got to be smart. Do some studying. Learn what the threats are in the area that you're going to be recreating in, and prevent things from happening. It's a lot easier to prevent bad things from happening than it is to cope with them after the fact. In the olden days, the mountain men days, they would carry what they called a possibles kit. And it was a kit that contained all of those important necessities that they could draw on when they were trapping beaver or hunting or whatever took them into the Rocky Mountains. Today we don't typically carry a possibles kit, but I'm going to suggest that every one of you, whether you be a fisherman, a backpacker, a hunter, or whatever takes you into the outdoors, ought to have a small kit like this, and in it those things that might enable you to survive an inconvenient night out. There's no reason to find yourself in a life-threatening night out if you're prepared for the event. And it doesn't take very much. This kit here weighs about 1.5 pounds. It contains those tools that you need to start a fire. It contains shelter in the form of a large plastic bag. It contains a whistle and a mirror. That's the foundation there. Fire, shelter, and signaling. So let's look at these real briefly. In this kit, there are 2 match cases, 2 waterproof match cases. And you have the choice here of carrying good matches in one and cotton balls that are saturated in Vaseline in the other. Vaseline-soaked cotton balls are absolutely the best fire-starting aid. You have a whistle. Your voice is a lousy signal. It doesn't carry very far, and it doesn't last very long. Carry the best whistle that you can, the loudest whistle you can, and have it on a lanyard and put it around your neck so that it's always there with you. The other fire-starting component is a metal match. Now you have your choices between cigarette lighters and matches and metal matches or ferrocerium rods right here. But with this I could start 500 fires, and so can you. It's simply a function of scraping, producing sparks. Also, you need to be able to reach out and touch that airplane that's going by, or that mountaineer on a distant peak, or the boat out in the lake. And you can do that with a good signaling mirror, a purposefully made signaling mirror. Any reflective material can be used, but if you have a purposely made one with an aiming mechanism in the middle right here, you could put a beam of light directly on that passing airplane. And I've seen the reflected light off this 2-inch by 3-inch mirror 26 miles away. So you can really reach out there and tap somebody on the shoulder. This is a large, adult-size, heavy-duty, 4 mil thick plastic bag. You may be a bit surprised by the color, but in truth, royal blue like this is a very good color for signaling. International orange, which you're probably familiar with, and royal blue are the absolute best colors. In the fall of the year, when many of you hunters come out to Colorado to hunt and you local residents head for the mountains, orange plastic bag tends to blend in with the surrounding countryside, the aspen and even the oak that we have around us today. Royal blue is a better color. This is an excellent shelter. You can crawl into it, your hands are free. It really provides some good protection. The other component of a survival kit would be some flagging tape, simply because people tend to move around. Sometimes it's just in the vicinity of their camp, and it's a good thing to be able to get back to your camp where all your supplies are. And you can mark your trail using some flagging tape. Excellent piece of equipment to include in your survival kits. So In a good survival kit, then, we have fire, shelter, and signaling. And after that, you can add whatever you like. And remember, that kit is no good to you whatsoever unless it's with you. If the horse is running off with it, or it's in the trunk of your car, you left it at home, it hasn't served you very well at all. So it's got to be with you. So it's got to be small, compact, lightweight, hopefully as inexpensive as possible, but bottom line, it's got to have the right stuff in it. Everybody that goes into the outdoors needs to know how to stay found. In other words, not get lost. And to do that, you need some equipment. You need a compass, and in this day and age, you should carry a GPS receiver with you as well. These are phenomenal pieces of equipment. Yes, I understand they need batteries, and they are electronic devices, and sometimes they fail, but they're very, very tough, and they do a super job. Learn how to use a GPS receiver and the compass, and then of course the map as well. It's a triad. It's a three-legged stool again. Those three things take a bit of learning, though. You can't assume you know how to do it. So go out and take some classes, because sooner or later you're going to be confronted with a situation where you know where you are, but you just don't know where the truck is, and you've got 360 degrees to choose from. So in those kinds of situations, you're going to find yourself wanting to take off through the woods and run. You don't really know where you're going. It's called panic. And by goodness, you better get a hold of that as quickly as you can. The STOP acronym works really well. Stop what you're doing. In fact, I say, sit down, get off your feet, because if you're on your feet, you're going to want to walk. If you're walking, you're going to want to run. And if you're running, you're going to want to run faster. And none of that is good. Get off your feet, sit down. Have a drink of water. A drink of water washes the taste of fear right out of your mouth. Sit down for 30 minutes. It takes at least that long for the adrenaline that is flooded through your system to subside to the point where the best piece of survival gear that you've got going for you begins to work again. Stop. Think. Again, this is so important that you keep your head together. You know, evaluate what kind of threats to your safety exist right now. Is it weather? Is it darkness? Stop and evaluate your surroundings. Observe what's going on around there. And then put a plan together based on your observations and your having taken a moment to observe around the area and see what the threats to your safety are. Put a plan together and then implement that plan. Put it into practice. Again, you may be the only one out there and there's nobody there to help you, so it's up to you. One of the reasons why people spend so much time lost roaming around the backcountry is because they don't know how to use a compass. It takes more time to learn how to use it than perhaps we have at this time. But a very simple way to set your compass up so that you can walk a straight line is to pick out your landmark, and we're going to use that snaggle tooth up on top of the ridge there. Point your compass at it so that the direction of travel arrow is pointing directly at your objective, and then rotate the bezel here until the orienteering arrow, which is this arrow underneath, and the north pointing arrow, which is the end that you see there, and when those two are lined up, you have the bearing locked into your compass. You now have the bearing locked into that destination point, and if it got dark or if the weather closed out, you would still be able to reach that point as long as you kept the orienteering arrow and the north pointing arrow lined up. And now it's simply a question of walking in the direction that the direction of travel arrow tells you to go. Here's a tip for you on using GPS receivers. When you step out of your truck, the first thing that you should do is mark your departure point as a waypoint. You mark that, and then you go into the waypoint list and make sure that that waypoint is there. And make sure that that waypoint, your truck, your departure point, is clearly delineated, clearly identified. If you've got 100 trucks, waypoints in there, which one's the right one when time comes to come home? So mark it clearly, make sure it's in there, and then you can go out and hunt and fish and wander around the backcountry with the confidence that when time comes to go home, you can pull up that waypoint, pick up a bearing, and travel back to your truck. Dehydration is one of the biggest medical problems that most people face in the outdoors. You need about 2 quarts of water per day to keep you functioning efficiently, because you lose water urinating, defecating, through sweating, and through respiration. That water has to be replaced, otherwise your brain's going to be affected. And the water that you drink should be disinfected. It should be purified in some manner. And you have choices, boiling being one of those choices. And the truth of the matter is, all you got to do is bring the water to a boil. It doesn't matter what the altitude is. You've killed everything that you need to worry about. There are also various kinds of filters, both bottles and pumps like that are on the market, and they do a good job. And then in this day and age, we also have some very good chemicals. For many, many years, iodine tablets have been the old standby for disinfecting water. Unfortunately, iodine didn't do anything for cryptosporidium. We now have a product on the market, tablets that release chlorine dioxide. And chlorine dioxide does an extremely good job of disinfecting the water. It kills everything. I encourage you, if you're using iodine still, to switch over to chlorine dioxide. It'll do a better job for you. Never forget that really the only shelter that you can truly count on is the clothing that you're wearing. Think of it in terms of it being a shelter. Because of circumstance, you may not be able to go out and build any of these elaborate shelters that you see in all the survival books. Whether you live or die may depend upon the clothing that you're wearing and the clothing that you can take out of your fanny pack or your day pack to augment that clothing. And remember as well that the clothing has got to keep you warm for that 8 or 9 or 10 hours that you're sitting out underneath a tree waiting for the sun to come up the next morning. The value of your clothing and its ability to keep you warm is going to be determined by how warm it keeps you when you are inactive. Now, what do we wear? Well, men in particular tend to wear a lot of cotton. And cotton is not a particularly good fabric to have up against your skin when it gets wet. It tends to hold moisture against your skin, and you'll never be warm with wet fabric layer against your skin. Instead, switch over to some kind of synthetic polyester. And it doesn't have to be an expensive brand of polyester. Your average Walmart version will do just fine. These synthetics are hydrophobic. They hate water. They help to move the water off your skin to the outside. And then you bulk up by wearing things like wool and some of the other fabrics that trap a lot of air around you. Dead air is warmth. And then on the outside, you better have something that is totally waterproof and windproof to keep the wind and water from penetrating those inner layers. Take care of your head. Some kind of a head covering is really important. You lose a lot of heat from your head if you don't protect it. And then I would also suggest that you really take care of your hands. You know, if you're out there for any kind of a protracted period of time, digging, cutting, breaking, hauling rocks, doing the kinds of things that survivors do, your hands take a tremendous beating. And the hands are critical to survival. If you can't do this, there's a lot of other things you can't do as well. The survival books are full of all kinds of elaborate shelters that a person in trouble is supposed to build in those last few moments before the sun sets or as the storm is about to break and the wind's picking up. And now you, the survivor, are supposed to go out and build something like that. I don't know how that's done. The other thing that I have a lot of disagreement with is the inclusion of emergency blankets, mylar blankets like the one that you see me holding here, in survival kits, or perhaps a person going down to a store and buying it and putting it in his pocket somewhere, thinking that if they get in trouble, they'll just unwrap this material, bring it around them, and spend the night there wrapped up in their emergency blanket. I wish it was as easy and as simple as the manufacturers and the writers suggest. It's not. In fact, I go so far as to say that these emergency blankets that are sold by the thousands across this country aren't worth the $2 or $3 you spend buying them. They are useless. All it takes is one little hole in that material and the whole thing comes up. Instead, what I recommend is you find the biggest, brightest colored trash bag that you can find, especially the ones that are used for lining rain barrels. That's 4 mil thick, tough, durable, big. This makes an outstanding shelter. And I would suggest that you get one colored blue or colored orange, like the ones that you see right here. These are the two colors that stand out the best to those that are trying to find you. Big, tough, heavy-duty trash bags. Once you're inside, you're completely protected from the wind and from the weather. Your hands are free. If you have to attend to an injury or do something else, you're free to do that. With a space blanket, you've got to hang on to it, because the moment you let go, it flies open and there goes all of your heat. You can spend hours inside here. One tip I would offer you is always breathe to the outside. You've got lots and lots of water vapor in your breath, and that will condense on the inner surface and get kind of damp inside. So breathe to the outside, and you can really cut down on the condensation problem. Another very useful material for building emergency shelters is your hardware store blue crinkly tarp. You get about a year's use out of them before they begin to leak. And don't get one any smaller than 8 by 10. Smaller than 8 by 10, you don't get the footprint that you need for shelter. But the beautiful thing about tarps is that they can be erected in many different ways. Everybody seems to have their favorite way of erecting a tarp. I've spent many nights underneath a tarp, such as the one that you see in front of you right now. This, with a fire in front, oh, that's comfort in the outdoors. In this, you can survive an inconvenient night out. It changes a life-threatening night out into a pure inconvenience. In order to erect a tarp, first off, you need to tie a piece of line, and I really like parachute line. Tie it off to your anchor point, go around the anchor, come back around the line, so that you create a little bit of a lasso effect right here. And then with this tag end, you just wrap around and around and around. This is called a timber hitch. It's one of the more useful hitches that I use in the outdoors. So twist it together like that, and then pass the twisted end behind, and you are now attached. It's easy to tie and easy to untie. Now you want to attach the tarp to the line, and the easy way to do that is simply to pass the line through the eye, and then with a stick, pass a stick through and pull it tight. And you are now attached. You want to get as close to the anchor as you can. And then working your way across the top of the tarp, each time you come to a grommet, put a stick through it. No knots required. And now what we got to do is tie it off. And the way to do that is come around your anchor here and tie it off, keeping it tight. A couple of half hitches around the line work well. Having done that, all you now need to do is come down and anchor the corners. Now you might do this with a rock, or perhaps there's a piece of shrubbery growing here, but the way I like to do it, using something that you already know how to do, we attach a piece of line doubled up. You can see how I've done that right there. Come down to your tent peg, pass it around a couple of times, and then tie it off using a knot that you already know, as if you were tying your shoes, only put an extra turn in that. Works very well. When it comes to starting a fire, you've got to have three things. You've got to have some heat, you've got to have some oxygen from the air around us, and you've got to have some fuel, either from the environment that you're in or Depending upon where you are, you may have to bring the fuel yourself. But it's the heat source that's the most important one to consider. The heat sources traditionally for fire starting have been matches, cigarette lighters, and then some other spark-producing device. If you think you can start a fire rubbing sticks together, you're a better man or woman than I am. I think that is too hard to do, particularly when you need a fire right now. So you've got to have one of these other heat sources. Matches, again, there's all kinds of matches. Here we have storm-proof matches. And here we have strike anywhere matches. And we've got strike on box matches, and waterproof matches, and windproof matches, and on and on and on and on. Well, after years and years of study, there's only one type of match that I think is any good. And that is the match that you see in my hand right here. The storm-proof matches, which up until recently were only available through REI, but now there are other brands out there with the same match. It's a heck of a good match. It is not waterproof, and it is not strike anywhere. I don't think strike anywhere is good simply because you've still got to find some material that's abrasive enough to create the heat that you need to light the match. And that can be hard to come by if you've got 2 feet of snow on the ground. So if you're going to carry matches, carry this kind right here, the REI stormproof match or a similar match under a different brand. Strike anywhere is very misleading. Waterproof is misleading. Waterproof means difficult to light. So pick the best match, and the best match is a stormproof match. Another source of heat that you have are cigarette lighters. But remember that cigarette lighters are pressure sensitive. The higher up the mountain you go, the less effective they are, until you reach a point where they don't ignite at all. They're temperature sensitive. The colder it gets, the less effective they are. They're affected by water and wind. And most importantly, you have to have good hand dexterity to flick your bic. You've got to overcome the childproofing, you've got to press down on the fuel release, and you've got to spin that wheel on top simultaneously. And that's hard to do when your hands are cold and stiff. So I don't like Bic lighters. Another point about Bic lighters too is if you drop them in a fire, they explode, and they've been known to kill people. So be very careful with Bic lighters. But my favorite is the metal match. You know, a metal match of this size here, you can start about 500 fires. I know because I've counted. Some metal matches have wooden handles, some have plastic, some have antlers, some have synthetic. Get a good wooden handle one, because if you have nothing else, you can shave down this wood into fine shavings, and you can actually light the shavings with your metal match. Good product. I think everybody ought to have a good metal match in their gear as their fundamental, their primary way of starting a fire. Now, nature does provide us some tinder. And what I have in my hand here is some pitchwood, some lighter wood, come from either fir or from pine, heavily impregnated with sap. Very, very good fire starting aid. If you can't find it anywhere else, go into Lowe's or Home Depot or Cabela's or one of those kinds of stores in the wintertime and go to the fireplace department, and you'll find the boxes of this in there. But with a good knife, you can simply shave down shavings like you see me doing. And these shavings will light with a metal match or any of the other heat sources quite easily. Just keep that all together, hit that with a metal match, boy, you've got some hot fire going right there. But you can't count on natural tinders being available to you, although it's a good idea to have a piece of that in your day pack. And that being the case, I would recommend that you go down to your favorite drugstore, get a package of pure cotton balls, make sure they are cotton balls, look for the little cotton symbol that you see right here, because sometimes they're made from polyester, and while polyester can be made to burn, it doesn't burn very well. And you take that cotton ball and you fluff it up into the largest disc that you can. Get all the lumpy parts out. This is going to serve as a wick initially. And then to it you add a big fingerful of Vaseline, petroleum jelly. It's not intuitive perhaps, but this stuff burns like a son of a gun. It's great. Big gob of it, smear it into the cotton, work it all around, and then store this in a match case or some other airtight, watertight container. And now you've got the best fire starting aid that you could possibly buy. Much better than all the cubes and sticks and pastes and goo that you can buy that is sold in the sporting goods stores. That's a good fire starter. When it comes to starting a fire, I'm going to show you a technique that you probably haven't seen before, but it's a technique that has worked for me all over the world. And first off, it involves building a platform. Now, this is probably not necessary in a dry, hot, sunny day, but under wet conditions, you want to isolate your tinder that you're trying to light from the wet ground. So always build a platform. And then on the windward side of the platform, you put a big chunk of wood. So the wind is coming this direction, directly over the platform. In the lee here, you're going to put your tinder. And we're going to use the cotton ball that has been saturated in Vaseline. And you pull it apart like this, bring the butts together, save all of those fluffy edges. And if you've been really clever, you've saved that aluminum foil from that can of coffee or that can of candy or peanuts. You know, you grab it by the corner here and you peel it off. Those make great bases, and you can put that down. And the reason for that is, when this begins to burn, when this cotton ball and Vaseline mixture begins to burn, the Vaseline is going to liquefy. It'll drain into the ground and you will lose it. But if you could put your cotton ball on something metallic, like that piece of foil, bottom of a pop can, a stone with a little depression in it, or even a seashell, something that will collect the oil, you can almost double your burn time. So you situate that right in the center. The nice thing about cotton and Vaseline is sticky. It won't blow away. Get your metal match, thumb on top, finger underneath. Practice a couple of times, make sure you're getting good sparks, and then direct those sparks down into your cotton. Now you don't have to rush, because that is a very windproof fire starting aid right there. Now you pick up a whole handful of twigs, nice and long, and you place them directly over that burning cotton ball in this manner. Now what you've done now is you've got a thermal that's coming right up through the fuel that you're trying to light. Cold air is being sucked in on either side, and it just sets up its own little conveyor belt. You don't have to get in there and blow on it. And you just got to be patient. Let it burn through, and then as it begins to burn through, you then pick up another handful of twigs. Again, small, maybe this time maybe pencil thick. You see it's beginning to burn through now. And you put those at 90 degrees. And as it begins to burn through that, 90 degrees. And 90 degrees again. 90, 90, 90, 90. You don't have to blow on this. If perhaps it's not taking off quite as well as you would like, come down to your brace here and just lift up on the brace to allow more oxygen to get sucked in underneath there. And then, and only then, when it's burning well, if you want to do teepees or log cabins or pyramids or any of those other techniques that you've perhaps used in past life, that's fine. But if you want to be more successful at getting a fire going, try this technique. Every year, dozens of people, maybe even hundreds of people, are badly burned in the backcountry across this nation. People who pile sticks up and then slosh gasoline onto it and then throw a match in there and it goes boom, it burns people badly. Don't ever do that. If you're going to use gasoline, if you're in trouble and you need to get a fire going and you've got a snow machine or an ATV or a motorcycle or even a car and you can recover some gasoline from it, container it, put it in the bottom of a pop can, maybe a cup of aluminum foil. And if you don't have that, dig a little hole in the ground and pour it into that hole and then light it. That's safe. It'll burn, it won't explode. This is automobile gasoline here, contained again in the bottom of a pop can. And once the gasoline is burning, then you can go ahead and lay sticks over the top of that and get your fire going. There are all kinds of devices on the market for signaling. High-tech varieties of equipment and low-tech. And I got a couple of the low-tech varieties right here, namely a good signal mirror. We're fortunate in Colorado, even in the middle of winter, that we have a lot of sunshine. And if you can reflect a beam of light from your position to a passing airplane or a boat or a hiker or some search and rescue team member that's out there looking for you, then your stay is going to be a rather short one. Now keep in mind that any reflective surface can be used to bounce sunlight, but a purposely made mirror does it just that much better. So you've got a compact mirror, or the rearview mirror off your truck, or perhaps even the little hologram on a credit card. All of those things have been used to bounce light. And if you're using an improvised method, extend your arm out and get the target between your fingers. And then bring the mirror up to your eye and shine the light on your hand, on the gap in your fingers there, and track that airplane all across the sky. Or you can put it out on a boat, out on a lake, or perhaps some hiker across the valley from you. As long as the light is on your fingers and your target is between your fingers, then the beam of light will be received by your target. Now, fortunately, there's a better way to do it, and that is with a purposely made mirror, a purposely made signal mirror. This one, if you look at it really close, has a mesh right in the center of it with a hole through it. On that mesh are little tiny microscopic glass beads, and those beads collect light. And when you face towards the sun and shine the light on your hand and look through the hole there at the light on your hand, a bright sunspot forms on that screen. And once you pick up that sunspot, you can drop your hand, and whatever you put that sunspot on, that's where that beam of light's going. It could be on an airplane or a boat or a hiker or a horseman or whatever. And you can actually bounce that beam of light clear across the horizon, all the way back. What you're capitalizing on here, if you go back to your high school physics, is the angle at which the light strikes this reflective surface is the same as its departure angle, incidence and reflection. So the sun can be low here and your target back in this direction, and as long as you can see that sunspot, again, pick it up on your hand first, then lean back. Laying down works as well. You can actually bounce that light clear across the horizon to the opposite horizon. Works great. You ought to have a signal mirror in your gear. On the high-tech end, let me just remind you that there's some very good equipment out there on the market in the way of beacons. A spot beacon like this, or some of the 406 megahertz beacons, really can reach out a long, long way via satellite and alert your family and perhaps the authorities that you're in trouble and need help. I'm a strong proponent of these beacons for those people, be they hunters or fishermen, that go off on their own into the backcountry, and should something happen, they need to be able to make contact with people at home. And you can do that with these devices, so you need to look into them and check them out. Great gear, they've saved a lot of lives.
Don't be mistaken. Colorado's backcountry is a safe and rewarding place, especially if you have the knowledge and skills Peter talks about. If you haven't already, do yourself a favor. Put together a survival kit, one that covers the basic survival categories. Remember, fire, shelter, and signal. More importantly, go out and practice the skills for each. Like Peter says, you will be a lot happier when you turn that life-threatening situation into just an inconvenient night out.